Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Bigfoot Researcher's Journal. You're looking at that hair sample that one of our team members pulled from a barbed wire fence here in South Florida, bordering a swamp. Now, here in South Florida, we know for a fact that there are no species that are known or accepted to science that actually have clear hair. The only thing on planet Earth that has clear hair is a polar bear.
What's up, man?
There's a nice sample of polar bear hair right there. You can see it's crystal clear. Same kind of hair as our sample. And as we know, polar bears do not live in the swamps of South Florida. That's ridiculous.
Man, you can have this heat. See ya.
So what animal does that hair come from that we found snagged on that barbed wire fence? That is the question, isn't it? Well, since we already know that polar bears are the only species on the planet that actually have crystal clear hairs, my hair's clear, bitch! And they don't live in the swamps of South Florida, it's hot! We have to deduct from logical reasoning that there's something else, something out here in the swamps in South Florida that has hair just like a polar bear. Why you all up on me, dog? Because it really is, if you use logic, crystal clear. But let's learn a little bit about what having clear hair is actually like. And it is cool. Did you know polar bears can actually turn green? It's a condition that results from them rolling around on the concrete in their enclosures. Small pieces of algae can get caught in their hairs and then start to grow. Over time, the polar bear begins to turn green. Curiously, some of the hairs in the sample that we found here in South Florida actually have algae growing on them as well. And if the polar bears, when they have algae growing on their hairs, turn green, and the sample we found here in South Florida has algae growing on it, turning it green, then logically, it's safe to say whatever this hair belongs to probably looks green. And since polar bears are extremely large carnivorous mammals, it stands to reason that the sample we pulled here in South Florida from that barbed wire fence in the swamp could be from a large carnivore that is able to hide because it appears to be the same color as the forest, from both its clear hair blending in and the algae growth all over its body. Aren't these guys supposed to be white? Polar bear hair literally adopts the coloration of the light that shines upon it. Like this guy enjoying a late afternoon walk in the orange afternoon sunlight.
I'm orange right now. It happens sometimes.
So in the afternoon sunlight, they can appear to have an orange tone to their hair. Or like this poor guy, with algae growing all over him, they can look green. Now, whatever it is that's out here in the swamps of South Florida that has this clear hair would surely have the same ability to change color like a polar bear. See, this color changing business is all about the hair, not the species that wears it. Sir, are you trying to tell me there's a giant, hairy, green monster running around the forest? So literally, if we were to put clear hair on a squirrel, super squirrel, and that squirrel was in a forest, he would all but vanish into the environment. The polar bear is a huge carnivorous mammal. Is it at least possible that there could be another huge carnivorous mammal in the state of Florida running around with clear hair? It's not just possible, it's happening, as you can plainly see from this sample. Whatever this thing is leaving this hair, it can blend in perfectly in whatever environment it's in. Take a long, hard look at what's in the center of this shot. This comes from a video, one of our research videos. This is an area that we regularly encounter Sasquatch. Do you see how it appears that there's just a tree there? Well, if you really look closer, you'll see that there's a huge face at the bottom of that tree. That's a Sasquatch. That's the clear hair and the achromatic coloration of their skin working its magic on your perception. But how far can we take this clear hair blending in thing? Check this out. Here's our hair sample that was pulled off the barbed wire fence in the swamp in front of a polka dotted pattern. As you can plainly see, the hair now appears to be polka dotted. Let's take a look at that shot in the forest once again. If something with that clear hair was standing in front of, say, 4 cypress trees that are colored gray, it would blend in. Remember? It even blends in with polka dots. As you know, trees don't typically grow faces. And to show you that this is actually what we're saying it is, here's a picture of the same exact trees a few minutes later. See? No face. But in the video taken a few minutes earlier, there appears to be a huge face with a big head, gray colored. It even has some green tones. You can even see a little shoulder behind the side of that other little tree on the right. Do you know what that looks like? That looks like what eyewitnesses have been describing for as long as people have walked the North American continent. It looks like a Sasquatch. A gray Sasquatch. You know what though? Let's just go ahead and outline him so you can really see what's there. So what do we have here? If we look in this area, you can see this line right here, right? Let's see what that is. Let's see if we can do a little drawing on that or something. Let's see if we can outline it for you. Here you go. This is part of the shoulder, and you can see there's a tree right here. But then you can see this individual's head actually right in here. And it goes behind that other one. And what do we have? We've got the outline of a head. And then right in here, you can literally see the nose, the area of the mouth, and in the eyes. Is it possible that all these people who say they've seen these things are telling the truth? Is it possible that at least in some cases, mainstream scientists, biologists in particular, are finding evidence that there's something else out there, the tracks, even the hair samples like the one we've examined today, and they're simply ignoring it? I would be willing to bet that to avoid becoming that guy, a biologist would do just about anything to ignore the physical evidence, the trace evidence, and the anecdotal evidence that conclusively shows that wild relict hominoids still walk the earth. That's what the hair sample says. Or the physical evidence, rather. Alright, so right off the bat, let's get started with some very simple ways that we nail them down from when we're thinking of planning an expedition to the point where we've been on the expedition and then come home. I'm gonna explain the entire process from step one. In the interim of that, you're going to get a lot of information on what they are and how they live, which is the key to actually documenting something, right? Like, you got to know what you're dealing with, right? So in the beginning of all this, I had a very limited perspective on this, and I've told you guys about that a lot, so we're not going to go into that a lot. I can just tell you that there's a very big difference between thinking you know about something and actually experiencing it, and then the awareness that comes with experiencing something. And it's really important that you understand that from the beginning, right? And it's a fact. Most people are not going to be able to experience this, or we'd be having a different conversation. I can guarantee that. There's 8.5 billion people on the planet or something like that. If most people could experience this, they'd be validated already because there would have been a shitstorm, over the human primate aspects of all this and why they're not being protected here in the U.S. Their habitat, this and that, and really that's where we're heading with this. First of all, there's a couple of things you need to understand before we get into the expedition. It's been our experience, and what we've documented is that there are preserves that are specifically set up for, I can't prove the reason, but there are Bigfoot in these preserves. And it's not that they're only in these preserves, but it's where they choose to bed down. It's like they live there, right? And curiously, these federally funded preserves are located in most wildlife management areas here in South Florida. We've also taken photographs and shot film of signs that literally say no hunting, dwelling area. Okay? Dwelling area. And I got news for you. There are no houses in there, and there are no trailers, and there's no camping, and there's no people. But it's labeled a dwelling area. And what I'll do is I'm going to show you that right now. Here's the dwelling area sign. Basically, I want to know who's dwelling in there, right? No one will answer these questions. No one will answer these questions. Let me say that again. No one has any explanation, officials, for why this sign is located on the fringe of the Pittman-Robertson Federal Management Area. Is it not enough to designate this area a wildlife sanctuary and there's no hunting? Why does it specifically have a word that is typically associated with human beings? Dwelling area, right? No firing guns and all that stuff. So, curiously, if we walked in that, we would be able to shoot Bigfoot, and we have, and you see them in our films. And so, the first thing that you need to know about this species is that, in our opinion, based on our research and things that we have shown you, we've put together the pieces of a puzzle that I believe has not been answered yet, and you can clearly see that all of the signs that the U.S. government knows that Sasquatch is real are right there. That they have been setting habitat up for this species since the 80s or mid-80s. I literally built the fence for 2 preserves, 9 miles long, on 2 sides of the road on a highway down here in Florida when they first set these areas aside. I worked for a fence company and put the fence up, and they told us to put the barbed wire facing in to keep things from coming out, obviously. We'd already put a bunch of it up the way we were supposed to with the barbed wire facing out to keep people out, because that's what you do with barbed wire, unless you're setting up a prison, in which case a prison has it pointing in. These things, all of these things, Melanie and I have come to realize that this is all about the Sasquatch. And so wildlife management, what does that mean? Well, it means wildlife management. But if you also have dwelling areas within these wildlife management areas, is it possible that through wildlife management, they've been controlling what these hominoids actually eat and where they can eat it by allowing humans to invade certain areas and pushing the game and pushing the Sasquatch into these fringe areas? Yeah, it's not only possible, it's happening, and that's what you see in the Bigfoot Researcher's Journal. Curiously, there's a document online called the Miller Document, and if you're a researcher or you're really interested in the subject, you need to look this up. And I'm telling you that I don't care how many people or who they are say that document has been debunked, or if this hoaxer released it, or that hoaxer did whatever. Online chatter is bullshit. It's chatter. That's just what it is. I'm telling you that in the end of that document, Mr. Miller, Dr. Miller, the guy who examined the Sasquatch that were killed on Mount St. Helens and a few from Texas and this and that, a forest fire somewhere, some lumberjacks found some bodies. This guy supposedly examined them, and this is what he says, and he tells you all about them. In the end of that document, he talks about how the U.S. government told him that they would be setting up preserves. In the timeline of that document, sometime in the 80s is when it started happening. So we know the document was written before that, and it's a point of fact that the preserves had been created and that wildlife management practices Really, they began right in that time frame. And that at this point, those preserves exist and the Sasquatch have been driven into that. Now, Miller says they're going to funnel these Sasquatch into these areas through wildlife management practices. You can't debunk something that's like that. The bottom line is the story, and I believe the data that's in that document is accurate. And we're seeing this in the real world. Like in the real world. This isn't online discussion about whether something's real. We're seeing this, and you are seeing that this document is accurate in our work. So when it comes down to these opinions of people who fancy themselves researchers because they dress up in camouflage and wear all kinds of web gear like they're in the military or something, I don't pay attention to anything these people say. They don't provide any evidence. They critique other people's evidence, and you know exactly how I feel about those types of individuals. Critics are people who can't do that shit. They can't do anything, so they criticize other people, and that's what that is. That's all that is. You have an opinion that's based on real field research about this? Can you actually show us something like that? Most people can't. So you gotta, as a researcher, as somebody who's really interested in this, begin to investigate that side of the subject, because you'll know exactly where you stand, and furthermore, exactly where you should begin looking. We've conducted years of field research, and we can provide you the information, and it goes like this. If you want to film a Bigfoot, find a Pittman Robertson federally funded natural area and get a camera and go in it and keep going in it. And I can almost guarantee you, in the South, because my field of expertise is in the South, I'm not some mountainous guy running around, Grizzly Adams and all that. Sasquatch research in the mountains, them guys are at a disadvantage. If you're up there, I feel for you, bro. Down here in the South, if you're in the South, you'll find these Pittman Robertson areas all over the place. They're within your county. Explain to me why a wildlife management area that basically is a county-controlled thing with local law enforcement, local wildlife law enforcement, or state wildlife law enforcement needs to have a specially funded federal preserve within there. There's no explanation for it. Explain that. Can you explain that? I can, and we've shown it to you. So the bottom line is like, you got to realize that stuff first. Like, this is known, okay? That's based on our work. This is known. I've talked to more people in official positions around the state of Florida than anybody I'm aware of, and there's something going on. I've had a couple of these people admit stuff to me on the phone. I've seen the way they act. They call them the mystery apes. The FWC calls them mystery apes. You mean the mystery apes? Yeah. People going missing, all this stuff. Look, the bottom line is like, this is a very serious issue, or the federal government would not have stepped in. I believe the Miller document is real. I believe the information in it is accurate because I'm seeing exactly what it says in reality. That's the first thing you got to recognize. So right there is, if you have these federally funded natural areas in your state, in your county, if you got one, right there, I believe that you can stop looking for a spot to go find them. Go straight in there, right? And here's the thing, you're allowed to be in there. You obviously have to be sensitive to the environment and all the wildlife that's in there. But I can pretty much guarantee you the wildlife that's in there is going to be few and far between, because it's going to be full of Sasquatch that are peeling their heads back. The deer population, the numbers are going to be off. If you're in an area where hunting isn't allowed, shouldn't there be more wildlife? Yeah, it should be full, but we don't see that. We don't see that. What we see is a bunch of big, scary hominoids, and you can see them in our film. Deer, few and far between. Hogs, few and far between. They talk about how they're managing the hogs. There's no cages in these areas. How are you managing the hogs, man? You know what I mean? You're not managing the hogs. That's cover for why the hogs are in short supply. That's officials saying, oh, we're managing the hogs. To explain why there's none. I'll tell you who's managing the hogs. The Sasquatch. They're managing the hogs. They're managing the deer. They're managing the squirrels. They're managing the possums. And wildlife management people are struggling to keep this a secret. The bottom line is all this is really happening. When you get into these areas, and this is the next part of this, you're going to see, man, it's like you won't be able to tell that they're there. Until you learn to recognize the signature of the species, it's going to be very difficult for you because everything they do just looks natural. You have to take a closer look. And we all know what this stuff is. If you're a researcher, you know what stick breaks and, if you know how to track, then you have an advantage. I did. I've been out in the wild my whole life, so tracking was a little bit easier. But the first step, right, gearing up. So let's talk about that. We're going to talk about gearing up in this next segment. So your very first consideration in gearing up for your expedition is going to be safety and the recognition in your head that you're going into a wilderness area with wild animals. Okay? What wild animals live in your region? Familiarize yourself with every single one of them and with their numbers and the possibility or probability that at some point in your research, either they're going to come across you or you're going to come across one of them or even several of them. Whatever it is, prepare yourself with your actual gear and clothing to deal with that situation, right? It's very simple. So, okay, when we talk about gear and we talk about gearing up, one of the things that you cannot avoid having come across your mind is like this terror. You know what I mean? Like you're like, what if I actually like get in there and there's like Bigfoot? You know what I mean? Which is like the whole goal. But the bottom line is you're approaching something that's like unknown. And I'm not talking about approaching a Bigfoot. I'm talking about going in the field looking for Bigfoot. First of all, it seems ridiculous. To this day, to me, it seems ridiculous. Like, I don't believe we should have to do all this to ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, we have punished ourselves physically for years, dude. Broken bones, hospital, this and that, stitches, infections, insect bites. 100 spider bites, man. Big old giant sores and boils and poison ivy for 7 months. Dude, it's a nightmare, right? So gearing up, the first thing that you got to understand is you're gearing up to be as comfortable as you possibly can. And that's going to have a lot to do with what region you're going in. So when I talk about gearing up, the first phase is going to be what you're wearing. And I'm just going to say it like this, man. If you have any inkling that camouflage is going to keep you from being seen by a Sasquatch, your perspective on this is like limited right off the bat, and you should identify that. Okay? Like the bottom line is, there is no amount of sneaking. Anything short of a ghillie suit and 3 days of crawling an inch at a time every hour, and you ain't sneaking up on these guys. It's not happening. They got their areas roped off, and you can believe that. Okay? That's one thing you can absolutely count on. When you find an area and you go in it, you're being watched. That's the beginning and the end of that discussion, okay? It may take you 3 years to figure that out on your own, like it basically took me. But the bottom line is I'm telling you, they know their area. They know every trail in it. Most of the trails in it were created by them. And you can identify a Sasquatch's trail very easily. It's going to be in the middle of nowhere, and it's going to be hard and compacted. And the ground around it's going to be soft. There's no explanation for why a hard trail is suddenly like right there. I can tell you, there's some big ass feet compacting that dirt. That's what it is. And these are the kind of things that you're going to notice when you get in there. But you need to wear something that's comfortable, right? If it's cold, dress accordingly. But the whole I'm going to hide from a Bigfoot and catch it on film, you should lose that perspective real quick because it's probably not going to happen. Now, what I will say is, if you dress comfortably, and what's an ideal what's an ideal situation? This is what you don't want to do. Yeah, you don't need to do that, right? like that's like ridiculous. So over gearing is ridiculous. I'm going to tell you this. What you need to do is focus on that camera you have, and you need to focus on being safe. And being safe means I can move quickly enough in case anything comes out that I'm not comfortable with being close to. In certain regions, there's bears, there's all this. So the very first consideration in all of this when you're gearing up is going to be what is going to hinder me in what I'm wearing? I can tell you right now, sometimes I wear a knife. Mel will tell you the same thing. Most of the time, I got an extra battery for my camera in a tripod, and Mel has a backpack with a bunch of apples in it and an iPad. And we bring a Jackberry charger. It's a field charger. It's about that big. And I've shown that in some of those videos that I talked about. But in gearing up, you want clothing that's non-constrictive. You want to be comfortable, especially if you're in the South, right? Now, if you're in the North and you're doing it in the wintertime, you know what's up, man. Come on. But really, you don't want to look like that guy, man. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that because it looks ridiculous, and we all know it does look ridiculous. It's a TV, for Christ's sakes. The bottom line is you're doing it because if something comes out like a bear, you already know that dude's getting his head ate off by a bear. There's nothing he can do about it. Like, he can drop it, but by the time he drops it and gets it all off, he's already, his face is gonna be licked off. Like a mountain lion's gonna be licking the skin off his face, right, with that tongue of theirs. You know, you need to like use your head about this. I don't recommend taking a firearm. I don't, but that's just me. You know what I mean? I would hate to be put in a situation where I had to use a firearm on one of them Sasquatch, because the other ones, I think you'd never find us. I'll just put it that way. If they tuck us under a stump in the canal, I don't know. But the bottom line is if you shoot one, you need to know there's other ones. So you take a firearm for bears, you take a firearm, you do whatever you want. I would say take some really strong pepper spray, a non-lethal, because everything out there is real sensitive in their olfactory systems, and a good pepper spray, man, will keep a bear off of your ass. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of stuff to consider, and safety is the very first thing you need to consider. What is the wildlife that I may encounter? Ask yourself that question. What is the average temperature of the place that I'm researching? What is it? Is it snowing right now? I mean, these are considerations, obvious stuff. But when I talk about not overgearing, that's what I'm talking about right there, okay? And I'm talking about the clothing aspects, and then, obviously, weapon type stuff, all right? Now, let's get on to the actual technology. All right, so now we're going to talk about tech, and this is where really all the difficulty comes in. It's one thing going on a hike in the woods and you're looking around and you got a lot of focus and everything's great. It's a completely different thing when you're trying to show exactly what's going on by filming it. This is the bane of my existence as a human being, okay? So why do I say that? I say that because the most difficult aspect of doing all this is you're trying to like show exactly what's happening, and no matter what technology you use, you're just one person. So you have to have somebody else if you're going and you want to really be effective and use the strategies that we're using. And when you're with someone else, you're then subject to that other someone else's experience level in using the technology that they have. So, and what has to happen eventually, if you have a partner or you have other people, and this is a very typical thing, is most people are inexperienced. They're not cinematographers, man, and they don't have a $400,000 camera like they do out in Hollywood. And, it's an environment that you couldn't bring that anyway. So we're all very limited, no matter what quality of camera you bring. And really, the higher quality cameras are not really compatible with like outdoor rough shooting. Like, I'm walking through this stuff and there's branches grabbing my microphone and snatching it off almost, and it's stripping out the lock on the microphone stabilizer. Like, all of this stuff, the window gets snagged by a vine as I'm coming through the little viewer window. And thankfully, my camera, it can go all the way forward. You know what I mean? But this is one of the things that I familiarized myself with about my camera before I bought it. This thing is bulletproof. I use a Canon AX20. And so when we got this camera, you're looking at a piece of technology that when you first start using it, you're overwhelmed. And the bottom line is it's got to zoom. And so you got to go through the I like using the zoom phase where you're like zooming in on everything and, it's like blurry. And when you zoom on something, there's a fine point where you're moving a quarter inch and it's out, zoomed all the way out. You can still see everything and it's crystal clear. When you zoom in at 30 feet, if you move a quarter inch and you're zoomed to like 30 feet, it moves 10 feet every quarter inch. So what happens is in the end, when you're examining film because there's something going on and you hear a giant coming through the bushes and the cameras are all pointed there and you're shaking, here it is, it's moving a quarter inch, it's moving, you're breathing heavy and your heart's pounding. Well, if you're zoomed in too much, that footage is at 30 feet, moving 8 feet around. So when you throw it in the editor and you're trying to identify the subject that did in fact just part the bushes and stare at you, which has happened to us, you can't even use the footage. You throw it in the editor and you get one frame every couple seconds when you settle down. Tripod. But then again, if you're hiking through thick bush, tripod's a hindrance. So you got to pack it, and you pack it in. Well, while you're packing it in and you're not using your tripod and you're filming, dude comes out of the bushes in front of you. Now you got the same situation. All of these different circumstances have presented themselves to Melanie and I a dozen different times in 3 years. And what I do most of my time is I examine footage, man. I'm looking at footage from the expedition and I'm putting it together so I can show you, the people who fund our work. And it is the ultimate frustration when you bust your ass and you try to get in the right spot after crunching all this data and you do in fact put your team in the right spot and the footage comes out and you can't even use but 4 frames of a 3.5 minute clip with an 8.5 foot Sasquatch standing right there. This is why footage is blurry. The camera's always moving. What happens when you move the camera in the smallest increment? Any camera. Try it with your cell phone. The autofocus starts to adjust. And like if you're using an iPad, there's no aperture, man. It's all digital. It's digital autofocus. But the slightest increment of movements, and that thing's that aperture inside that digital aperture is processing, and then it has to grab again. So a lot of what goes on, and one of the reasons why you see a lot of slow motion breakdowns in our films is because the footage is ultimately unstable. I have footage on tripods, and it's unbelievable. And you've seen that, the Betty Davis footage, man, where big gray Sasquatch is just peeking around. It's in Two Trees Part 2 on the website. Give it a look. Incredible stuff shot with tripods, But the bottom line is if you don't do a good job with the technology, then when you get home, you're going to be pissed off at yourself and your partner if they're the ones shooting it. The first 5 or 6 times, you're just blown away that you caught a Sasquatch and it doesn't bother you. But long-term field study and documentation of several different individuals, we're supposed to be getting better at this, and we are. But that comes at a cost. That comes at pushing to get better. And Mel will tell you, there's a couple times she felt like slapping the shit out of me, man, because I push. Hold the camera steady, babe. Hold the camera steady, babe. And it's like, she just wants to tell me, shut up. But the bottom line is she's here watching the editing process. And when she sees me have to chase a crop around all over this thing, and I get frustrated, I'm like, I'm just not doing this anymore. I can't do it anymore. I can't break down 7,000 frames another day. I don't even have hair, or I'd pull it out. You know what I mean? And this is what the job is for us. You know what I mean? I mean, the more stable your footage, the less time you spend breaking it down. That's the bottom line. And I can tell you, I've broken down more footage than any human being that you'll ever see or hear of. And if you doubt that, then you're not a member of CryptoReality.us and you haven't seen over 100 films with breakdowns in them. Bottom line is, that's what I do, is break down footage. And I'm telling you, regardless of the technology that you buy or the quality of the technology or whether the resolution is in 1080p or 4000, if you can't hold that camera steady at the right moment, anybody can hold it steady practicing. But when there's a giant Sasquatch there, you better have nerves of steel. And if you do, then you're going to get some clear footage. So technology, I use a Canon AX20. Most of your SLRs are quality. They shoot 12 megapixels. Man, that's great. Bottom line is you want to make sure that that footage can be transferred to a computer and not over compressed. There's a lot of variables that go into this. Compression formats are so important because my program is Final Cut Pro. I work on an iMac. I've always worked on a Mac, and I've always used Final Cut Pro. Bottom line is it's compression format friendly. It has, I typically compress in H.264, but most people are like, I don't even know what that means. The bottom line is it's a quality compression format. MP4 can be a quality compression format, but the bottom line is that's just on the editing end. Then you got to upload it to the internet. You know what I mean? If you got a YouTube channel, when you upload an MP4, you lose resolution. Period. H.264, the compression ratios are more stable, and they work perfectly for what we do. And then one thing is this: if you go back and you look at our films, we get better at using the technology and holding the camera more steady in crucial moments when we're freaking out. And we know they're right there. You can smell them, you can hear them, and you know this thing is within grabbing distance or jumping distance, and they can jump a good distance. You're going to freak out. This is just what it is, man. It's a natural response to the fact that you could be killed any minute. I don't care what people tell you. There's a lot of people out there going to give you all kinds of advice about what to do and this and that. And I got news for you. Most of them would run. And they wouldn't even get footage because that's the reality of what we're doing. Everybody's got great advice. What I suggest is familiarize yourself with your gear. Start shooting in your backyard. Start shooting in your backyard, man. Put something out there, a cup, a glass, walk around, and then suddenly turn towards the glass and start zooming. Get to the point where you don't zoom in too close. Zooming too close is the most common mistake people make. You can have the best technology on the planet, and I can tell you right now, if you don't use it right, you're out of gas. Because a Sasquatch, and this is the reality of most of the footage that you see, is only going to be visible for a few seconds. You don't even know this, right? You don't know this. You think they're just standing there for an hour. That's all slow motion breakdown. Some of these guys, I have to break down the footage to 1% speed of the actual footage. Why is that? Because they're moving like lightning. They're popping into a hole, and they're looking, and they're gone. And that 2 seconds, I break down to 2.5 to 3 minutes with slow motion footage because it's 30 frames per second or 1,800 frames per minute. Now, we do have long clips, and you can see them, and they're blinking, and they're doing all kinds of stuff. And they know we're shooting them. Cameras are pointing right at them, man. They're not going to move. They're trying to play like I'm not here. I got achromatic going on. This dude don't see me, even though we do. We have those situations, man. You know what I mean? But like I said, few and far between is somebody who can do that and hold it steady and control themselves when they know that there's a 50-50 chance that what you're filming is going to jump on you. That's the trick. So technology, I recommend any of the major brands that shoot in 1080p or above. If you can get 4,000, get it. But also remember, shooting footage is just the beginning part. If you catch a good Sasquatch on film, the last thing you want to do is upload some crap footage and try to show people. So you want to buy the back end technology, and we'll get into that right now.
I didn't do anything.
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
What's the noises about?
It's technique, man. Condescend me, man.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, what?
What did you say?
I didn't say nothing. Why y'all up on me?
You being condescending?
No. Are you?
Dude?
Are you being condescending?
I'm talking about that stuff. I thought you had it under control.
Why y'all up on me?
That's my job, dude. It's my job.
Oh, it's your job, huh?
Job. It's my hardest job.
You're funny.
You know it's true, baby.
Alright, cut.